The rope scraped hot across Thomas McKenna's neck while the crowd howled for his death. In half a minute he'd drop for a crime he hadn't done. Then, out of nowhere, help came from a place no one would expect. Dead Rock, Arizona's dusty square, throbbed with angry voices. Thomas stood on the gallows, wrists tied behind him, staring at a sea of faces hungry for blood. The sheriff tightened the noose one last time, his worn hand steady even as people shoved and shouted below. The preacher muttered a prayer nobody cared to hear. Thomas's mind rushed to his sister Mary, likely sitting at home, still waiting for him to bring medicine for her sick boy. She would never learn the truth about that missing stagecoach cash. She would never know her brother died clean. The sheriff lifted his arm, and the square went silent. Even the wind quit. Then a gun cracked. The bullet sliced the rope above Thomas, strands of hemp whipping apart. Panic exploded. Folks dropped behind wagons and doorways. The sheriff spun, drew his pistol, and swept the rooftops with wild eyes. The slack noose slipped off Thomas's head as another shot blew apart a support beam. The platform lurched, and he staggered to the edge. Through dust and screams, a shape strode out from behind the general store, tall and lean in a black duster that flowed like dark water. A wide hat hid his face, but every move was sharp and sure. He fired twice more, not to kill, but to send people diving. A coal-black stallion pounded into the square. Without slowing, the rider hooked a fist in Thomas's shirt and ripped him up behind the saddle with startling strength. The sheriff fired once as they tore away, but the shot sailed wide. His cursing bounced off the adobe walls, while the black horse shot for the red hills beyond town. Thomas clung tight, heart banging in his chest. Wind slapped his face as they cut through sage and broken stone. Behind them came the sheriff's posse, voices fading but not gone. After a few breathless minutes that felt like hours, the stranger reigned in near a ring of rust-colored rocks. Thomas slid down, legs shaking. The man in black finally turned, and Thomas met eyes like winter storms. What he said next turned the rescue upside down. "You were supposed to be hanging by now, Thomas McKenna." The voice was rough, like gravel in a dry throat. He swung down slow, hand near his gun. Hearing his full name froze Thomas's blood. Only lawmen and bounty hunters called him that. The stranger tipped off his hat, showing a scar-cut face and iron-gray hair Thomas knew from wanted posters tacked in every town between here and California. Black Jack Morrison, legend, killer, bank robber, ghost of the Tombstone Massacre. Why would that outlaw save a man from the rope? Thomas's mouth went dry. Black Jack had put more men in the ground than cholera, robbed more banks than the James boys, then vanished 3 years back after Tombstone. Black Jack studied him, lips curling in a smile with no warmth. "Your sister Mary says hello. How's little Timothy's fever?" Thomas nearly buckled. How could this man know about Mary's sick boy or the medicine trip that ruined everything? Unless he'd set the whole thing up. "You framed me," Thomas whispered, the pieces falling like dominoes. The stagecoach holdup, the planted proof. Black Jack's laugh rattled like a tin can full stones. "Smart. But that's only half. Your dance on the rope was just the opener. The real act starts when that posse reaches us." Then Thomas heard it, the far roll of hoofbeats bouncing off the canyon. The sheriff and his riders were coming hard, mad they'd lost their show. Black Jack didn't flinch. He checked his pocket watch like he was waiting for Sunday dinner. "We have to move," Thomas said, panic pushing his words. "They'll hang us both when they catch up." Black Jack pocketed the watch and swung back into the saddle. "That's the plan, son. You're going to draw them where I want them. Climb up." Thomas hesitated. This rescue felt wrong, like stepping onto ground that looked solid but wasn't. With dust rising behind them, he grabbed on anyway, choosing a chance over a sure death. They threaded deeper into red rock country, weaving through tight cuts and hidden turns. The chase noise grew louder, doubled and tripled by the stone. Thomas heard the sheriff splitting his men, sending them down side paths. Then Black Jack stopped sharp at a pinch in the canyon. Ahead narrowed to 2-horse width, then opened into a broad basin ringed by high walls, a bull made for killing. Blackjack twisted in the saddle, with a look Thomas couldn't read. Time to settle debts, McKenna. Your sister's boy will live, but someone's dying today. The posse's shouts drew closer. Thomas understood. He wasn't saved, he was bait. Cold ran through him. Blackjack kicked through the gap. The basin beyond lay striped with long shadows, perfect pockets for a rifle to hide. Too perfect, like someone had drawn this up on a map. Blackjack slid down and checked his rifle with easy skill. The posse would ride straight at them, following the trail as if on rails. Thomas climbed off, legs rubbery, and scanned the walls for other men. The place felt like a grave dug in advance. "You're not the only quarry," Blackjack said, voice echoing off the rock. "That sheriff has something of mine. He took it 3 years back." Hooves thundered louder. The sheriff barked orders. Deputies shouted over one another. Thomas caught the ripe smell of sweating horses drifting in on the wind. Blackjack tucked himself behind a boulder, guarding the mouth. Thomas crouched behind another rock, feeling naked anyway. In the dust lay a dropped revolver, old but loaded. He snatched it up. One thing bothered him. Blackjack kept checking that watch and twitching like a hunter who knew he was hunted. The first rider burst into view. Deputy Wilson, young and reckless, spurring too hard. Sheriff Garrett followed, older, wary, eyes raking the ledges. Then Thomas saw a flash on the east wall, sunlight off steel. A rifle pointed not at the entrance, but at Blackjack's hide. Someone else waited up there, and they wanted Blackjack dead. Thomas opened his mouth to warn him, then stopped. Why save the man who framed him? Let the hidden gunman finish it. Except the posse had come straight into the bowl. When the shooting started, everyone inside would be trapped. The rifle's glint moved, tracking Blackjack. Thomas had seconds. "Jack, east wall sniper." His shout cut the air as the first shot split stone, where Blackjack's head had been. Blackjack dove. The hidden shooter had missed the clean kill. Thomas's warning also gave away his spot. Wilson hauled his mount around, gun up, hunting the voice. Sheriff Garrett flung up a hand and spread his men into cover. The canyon blew up with gunfire. Chips sprayed Thomas as the sniper swung at him. Blackjack slammed rounds back toward the high perch, each report booming in the bowl. The whole mess snapped into focus. This was never about Thomas. Someone used his hanging to pull Blackjack Morrison into this pit and kill him. The sheriff roared over the chaos, voice thick with hate. "Morrison, you shot my brother in Tombstone. This is the bill due." Thomas reeled. The sheriff hadn't chased him. He wanted Blackjack. The ghost on the wall, the precision shots, the clean plan, it all fit. Blackjack barked a bitter laugh while he reloaded. "Your brother drew first, Garrett. Just didn't draw fast enough." Another crack from the eastern ledge sent both men scuttling. Thomas finally saw the shooter, thin, steady, working a bolt with calm hands. Not wild shooting, careful execution. The deputies crept forward, cover to cover. 6 men in all, tight jaws, tight grips. If they tried to run back through the choke, the sniper would cut them down. Blackjack flicked his eyes at Thomas and jerked his chin at a narrow split in the south wall. Another way out, barely wide enough to squeeze through. Reaching it meant crossing open ground under the rifles. "Aye, pick your fate, McKenna," Blackjack called, shooting between words. "Die here with me or sprint for that crack." Thomas weighed the gap, the moving deputies, the muzzle flash above. Every path looked bad. Staying meant death for sure. He was set to dash when a woman's voice cut the air from the eastern wall, sharp, clear, full of command. "That's enough, Marcus. Let the boy go. Your quarrels with Morrison." Thomas froze. He knew that voice. It couldn't be, but it was. The sniper, Marcus, answered without lifting his eye from the scope. "He's seen too much Elena. He's part of it now." Elena, the name Mary never used anymore. His sister's true name from before she fled California. Mary, the woman nursing a sick child at home, was here on that wall, tangled in this trap. Blackjack watched Thomas with something close to pity. "Still think you've got the pictures, son?" The deputies edged nearer. The sniper lined up again, and Thomas's Mary spoke once more, soft turned steel. "Marcus, stand down. That's an order." The rifle hesitated. Even from below, Thomas could see the man's doubt. Whoever Mary had become, hard men listened. Blackjack slid a step closer to Thomas. "Your sister's been grinding this axe for 3 years, ever since Tombstone. My bullet didn't just take Garrett's kin, it made your sister a widow." Thomas staggered under the words. Mary's man hadn't died of fever. Blackjack killed him. Worse, Mary had dug into the past and learned Thomas's secret. He was Jack Morrison's younger brother, hiding behind a new name. Sheriff Garrett, bleeding anger, tried to hurt his men, but their nerves frayed under the shouting from the ledge. The lie about the sick boy cracked, too. The medicine Thomas chased wasn't for a simple fever. "Your nephew's dying, Thomas," Mary, Elena, called, her voice carrying like a bell. "Poison. Slow, cruel. The cure costs more than all of Dead Rock. But the price on Jack Morrison's head would buy 100 vials." Blackjack's face drained. "She's got my boy," he whispered. "Elena's holding Timothy." The snare went deeper than Thomas dreamed. Mary had not only used the hanging to bait Jack, she'd claimed a child to force him out. She'd framed Thomas to make sure he clung to the only hand offered. Marcus swung his barrel toward the deputies to stall them, while Mary bared more truth. "You thought you could vanish, Jack? New name, new life? I found you. Found your son. Found your brother." Sheriff Garrett heard enough to twist his face into a knot of rage and shock. "Morrison's that a brother?" he croaked. "You're all Morrisons?" Thomas's gut turned. This wasn't just about money. Mary wanted to wipe out the Morrison line, child, outlaw, and the brother who never knew he was a Morrison at all. Hoof thunder rolled again from the north and south. More riders. Mary hadn't brought one sniper. She'd brought an army. Thomas counted a dozen coming fast. Hired guns, bounty men, hard cases whose only law was pay. 6 deputies would be outnumbered 3-1, and they didn't even see it yet. Garrett's head jerked at the noise, fear and fury mixing in his eyes. "Morrison, what have you done?" Blackjack grabbed Thomas by the shirt and yanked toward the narrow split. "We've got 2 minutes before this turns into a meat grinder. Your sister's not taking captives." Thomas balked, staring up at the wall. "What about Timothy? What about the cure?" Blackjack's eyes went flat. "There is no cure. There never was. The boy's been dead 6 months." The words hit like a hammer. Every move, robbery, hanging, miracle rescue, built on a lie. Mary had used a dead child as bait because it was the one thing sure to drag Blackjack out of the dark. The first wave of hired guns poured into the north slot, rifles up. Deputies whirled, trapped between known enemies and new ones. Wilson's mount reared as bullets stitched the air from 3 sides. Marcus's rifle cracked again, but now he shot at everyone, law and killers alike, to break the pattern. Mary's plan was plain and cruel. Kill everybody in the bowl and let the desert bury the truth. Sheriff Garrett took a round in the shoulder and collapsed, crawling for cover with blood blooming through his shirt. This wasn't justice or vengeance anymore. It was a slaughter. Blackjack slid into the rock split. "Move, Thomas. We can't save them." But Thomas couldn't run. Men were dying for sins tied to his blood and a web of lies he'd never chosen. Wilson was hardly more than a kid. Likely a girl back home waited on his letters. He didn't deserve to die for the name Morrison. Thomas made his choice. Instead of slipping into the gap, he snatched Wilson's dropped rifle and fired back at the hired hands. The kick bruised his shoulder. His first shots went wild, but it was enough to buy the deputies a breath. "You fool." Blackjack barked from the rocks. "She'll kill you too." Mary's voice slid down the wall like ice. "Yes, Thomas. I will. You carry the Morrison stain, and Morrison's ruined my life. Timothy was all I had left, and Jack took him from me, too." The paid guns kept pushing, tight and trained, while the lawmen faltered. Even Thomas's stand might not turn the tide. Then Mary screamed. Up on the east wall, Marcus's rifle fell quiet, and scuffling echoed over stone. A small shape stepped into sight where the sniper had been. Thomas's heart stumbled. Timothy alive. A thin boy, pale, but breathing, hugged the heavy rifle, almost bigger than he was. Marcus lay still behind him. Mary's shriek cracked the air. Timothy, down. You're supposed to be dead. The child's voice came clear. I heard you, Aunt Elena. You said you poisoned me, but I never got sick. Uncle Marcus told me the truth. The world tilted again. Marcus hadn't been Mary's hired killer. He'd been shielding the boy. His careful shots, his delays, his disobedience. He'd been buying time. Blackjack crawled out from a split, face raw with hope and fear. Son? Timothy. The boy nodded, tears cutting lines through dust. She killed Mama. Papa said it was an accident, but I heard her plan it. She wanted me to hurt you. The shooting on the floor slowed as men stared upward, unsure who to fight. Sheriff Garrett, bloody and weak, croaked, Hold your fire, boys. This ain't ours anymore. Thomas saw Mary's hand go to her belt, the flash of a knife. She would rather cut the boy than lose him. Without thinking, Thomas raised the deputy's rifle and fired. The bullet hit her shoulder and spun her away. She screamed and vanished behind the rocks. Blackjack scrambled up the wall toward his son, climbing like a man with fire beneath him. Thomas followed, finding holds by feel. Below, the hired guns broke and rode, their pay and leader gone. They had no reason to die. Marcus still breathed when Thomas reached him, a hole in his chest, eyes bright with pain. Been watching the kid for months, he rasped. Couldn't let her do to him what she did to his ma. Thomas found Mary huddled behind a boulder, clutching her bleeding shoulder. The woman who'd raised him, who'd wiped his tears and patched his knees, glared up with pure hate. You ruined everything, she hissed. Just like your brother ruined me. Thomas was done with her poison. My sister died in Tombstone with her husband, he said softly. What's left of you isn't Mary anymore. Dusk settled over the desert as Blackjack held his son for the first time in 3 years. Thomas helped the sheriff bind his wound, knowing he still had a trial ahead for the stagecoach mess, but feeling a strange calm anyway. Some traps, he'd learned, are worth walking into if they lead you back to the truth, even if that truth is jagged, ugly, and stitched to your own name. The outlaw had cut him from a rope, then dragged him into a killing ground. But sometimes a snare snaps both ways, and sometimes mercy shows up in the last place you think it will. Thomas's warning snapped the canyon awake. The first shot sparked off Blackjack's boulder instead of his skull, and the whole basin erupted like a powder keg. Lead hissed, stone chipped, and horses screamed while dust boiled up, turning men into shadows. From the eastern wall, a lean figure worked a bolt rifle with cold patience, tracking Blackjack instead of the posse jammed at the mouth. Sheriff Garrett spread his riders into cover, voice hoarse with rage. This wasn't about the framed stagecoach man at all. It was a reckoning with the outlaw who'd bled Tombstone. Blackjack laughed hard and bitter. Your brother drew first, Garrett, just slower than me. Another crack from above sent Thomas scrambling. He grabbed a scuffed revolver from the dirt, heart pounding, mind racing. The pattern was clear now. His hanging had been bait, his rescue the lure, and this red rock bowl the trap meant to bury Morrison and anyone foolish enough to chase him in. Blackjack flicked his chin toward a knife-thin split in the southern wall, an exit barely wide enough to scrape through. But crossing 30 feet of open gravel under a sniper's, I was as good as begging for a coffin. Before Thomas moved, a woman's voice, sharp as broken glass, cut from a ledge. That's enough, Marcus. Let the boy go. Your fight's with Morrison. The sniper didn't flinch. He's seen too much Elena. The name slammed into Thomas, Elena, the real name his sister hid when she tried to start over as Mary. Blackjack slid nearer in the chaos, eyes colder than steel, but edged with pity. Your sister's been building this for 3 years, son. My bullet didn't just drop Garrett's kin, it made her a widow. Thomas felt the ground tilt, memories smashing into place. Mary's letter about fever, the empty larder, the quiet grief. She had lied about everything. Sheriff Garrett, hearing enough to taste the truth, stared across the gun's smoke at Thomas like he'd sprouted horns. Morrison's had a brother, he shouted, and the name Thomas McKenna burned away under the old family he never knew he carried. From the ridge, Elena's voice rang out calm and cruel. "Your nephew's dying, Thomas. Poison, slow, mean, expensive to cure. But Morrison's bounty would buy 100 vials." Blackjack's jaw set. "She's holding my boy," he breathed. The snare tightened. Mary had used a child to pull a ghost out of the desert and framed a nobody to steer him into a kill zone. Hoof thunder rolled in from 2 directions, and a dozen hired guns poured into the canyon side cuts, rifles up, eyes dead, the kind of men who worked for coin and never asked names. The 6 deputies were suddenly outnumbered and boxed, with a patient rifleman above them and an outlaw on their flank. Blackjack seized Thomas's shirt and dragged him toward the crack. 2 minutes before this turns into butcher work. She's not taking prisoners. Thomas jerked free, eyes on the ledge. What about Timothy? The cure. Blackjack's look went as flat as a tombstone. There isn't one. Wasn't ever. The boy's been dead 6 months. The words punched the air out of Thomas. Everything, gallows, rescue, pursuit, built on a lie so cold it made his bones hurt. The first wave of guns for hire swept in from the North Pass, bullets whining past rearing horses. Marcus's rifle slowed them with precise shots that seemed to hit everywhere and nowhere, buying seconds while the floor of the basin turned to a maze of angles and screams. Mary's plan was simple: drown the canyon in blood and let the desert cover the story. Sheriff Garrett took a round through the shoulder and collapsed, still crawling for cover, jaw clenched through the red spreading across his shirt. Blackjack vanished into the split, but Thomas couldn't run. These men were dying in a storm built for Morrison sins and McKenna lies. Leaving felt like theft. He scooped up a deputy's long gun, braced awkwardly, and fired. The kick rattled. His teeth. The first shot went wild. The second chipped rock near a gunman's boot, but the noise and defiance gave the deputies a breath to regroup behind fallen horses and broken stone. Idiot. Blackjack barked from the crack. "She'll kill you with the rest." Elena's answer flew down like winter. "Yes, Thomas. You carry the stain. Your brother burned my life to ash. Timothy was all I had left, and Morrison took him, too." The hired guns pressed forward in clean wedges, methodical and sure. The deputies fell back step by step, breath ragged, hand shaking. It was breaking. Then Elena screamed, a raw tear of sound from the eastern wall, and the rhythm shattered. Marcus's rifle went silent. Scuffling scraped rock. A small shape eased into view at the sniper's perch. A thin boy, hair plastered by sweat and dust, clinging to a rifle nearly bigger than his frame. Timothy. Alive. Beside him, Marcus lay crumpled and breathing shallow. Elena's shriek tore across stone. "Timothy. Down. You were supposed to be dead." The boy's voice traveled clear. "I heard you, Aunt Elena. You said you poisoned me, but I never got sick. Uncle Marcus told me the truth." The canyon held its breath. The gun hands wavered. Sheriff Garrett, bleeding and pale, rasped, "Stand down, boys. This ain't our quarrel." Blackjack shoved out of the split and looked up like a man seeing daylight after years underground. "Timothy." The child nodded, tears cutting lines through dust. "She killed Mama. Papa said accident, but I heard her plan it. She wanted to use me to hurt you." The mask dropped from Elena's face. Hate carved her features into something hard and empty. "You should have died," she spat. "You all should have. Husband, life, gone because of the Morrisons." Her hand flashed to a belt knife, steel catching the sun. She'd cut the boy rather than lose her revenge. Thomas didn't think. He aimed and squeezed. The bullet took Elena in the shoulder and spun her away. She screamed and vanished behind the rocks, knife clattering against the ledge. Blackjack climbed like a man with fire on his heels, hauling himself to his son while Thomas followed, fingers searching for holds on hot stone. Below, the hired guns swore and scattered. Without pay and orders, they had no reason to die on strange dirt. Marcus's eyes fluttered open when they reached him, a red bloom at his chest, breath thin. "Been watching the kid months," he wheezed. "Wouldn't let her do to him what she did to his ma." Thomas found Elena hunched behind a boulder, clutching her wound. eyes full of venom that didn't look like any sister he'd ever known. "You wreck everything you touch," she hissed, voice raw. "Just like your brother ruined me." Thomas's anger was a quiet, steady thing now. "Mary died with her husband in Tombstone," he said softly. "Whatever you became after, I don't know that woman." On the basin floor, deputies helped the sheriff to a sitting lean against a rock. One of them lifted a hand to Thomas in a tired, grateful wave. The surviving gun hands rode out the way they'd come, small in the distance, swallowed by heat shimmers and red stone. Dusk slid down the walls in soft layers. Black Jack gathered Timothy and held him like a man trying to memorize the weight of hope. The boy tucked his face into his father's neck and finally let go, sobbing hard in hiccups. Thomas climbed back down, tied a strip of shirt around the sheriff's shoulder, and sat with him until the shaking eased. He knew the judge would want him for the stagecoach business, knew a cell and a hard talk were coming. Strangely, fear had no teeth left. Some snares, he'd learned today, are worth stepping into if they lead you out of lies. Above them, the wind braided through cholla and mesquite. Black Jack looked over his son's head at Thomas, nodding once. Thanks, apology, promise. Too many words to fit in a desert man's throat. The gallows rope had burned Thomas raw. The rescue had felt like a trick, and the canyon had tried to swallow them all. But in that red rock hush, with the boy breathing steady and the sheriff still alive, he understood something he'd never forget. Traps can snap both ways, blood can lie, and mercy can arrive wearing a black duster and a scarred face right when the world thinks you're finished.